If you would, take your Bibles, turn over to Hebrews, the 9th chapter. Hebrews, the 9th chapter. There's great pressure on these Jewish Christians to choose Judaism over Christianity. Just kind of big picture again, just stepping back for a moment as we get into a new chapter. Judaism's hostility toward Christians, that's increased tremendously by this point. The effort to maintain Jewish control of Christianity, even among Christians, the Jews, there are more Gentiles now than there are Jews in most congregations. So while the Jews are not responding, the Gentiles are, and they're losing that control. And then you add to that Roman persecution. So there are a lot of external pressures and internal pressures related to that. The overall approach in the 13 chapters, the writer is comparing Judaism and the things of that old covenant, we can refer to it that way now from chapter 8, to the new covenant and the things related to it, Christianity, and challenges the readers to choose once for all which is superior. And so the question now is from chapter 8, 9, 10, and onward, why would you ever go back to Judaism? And that's been the effort all the way through this. A lot that we can get out of this as well. There's the overall outline that we're using. And we're right here, the superior covenant of Christ, started in chapter 8, verse 1, goes all the way into chapter 10, verse 18. And if you'll notice, we're down here based on better sacrifice, and then you get the practical applications. So based on better sacrifice, Hebrews 9 into chapter 10, verse 18. So we're not done with this section yet, although we're not going to refer as much to the superior covenant aspect as some other aspects to it. So Hebrews 9, verses 1 through 15, there's a greater, more perfect tabernacle. 3 reasons overall from this material. We've got a superior covenant that started in chapter 8. We saw that. We're going to deal with, beginning today, the superior sanctuary. That begins in verse 1 of chapter 9 and continues. And then the superior sacrifice actually begins in chapter 9 and then goes into chapter 10, about verse 18. But think about that. We began with the sacrifice of Christ, and we're going to end this whole thing with the sacrifice of Christ. So it's not like we really left it at all to begin with. So from here on out, we'll talk about the superior sanctuary and sacrifice of Christ. So Hebrews 9, 1 through 15, a greater, more perfect tabernacle. This will be our focus. A great high priest with his own blood. Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant. And then in the next section, beginning about halfway down through chapter 9, comparison of the sacrifices. So the key word is going to be the word blood. And the blood of the old covenant versus his blood and his sacrifice. So Christ's sacrifice fulfills God's will. His death perfects the sanctified. So let's begin with this thought in mind. We're going to kind of go to the last question that you had in this section. There were, I think, 4 or 5 questions from the materials we had. Go to this one where it says, above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. And then it ends with this, of these things we cannot now speak in detail. So the question is the Holy Spirit saying the details of the tabernacle are not important? Is that what you should have got out of that? No, several have said no. So tell me then, what does it mean?
I don't need to go into that right now.
Yeah, that's it. It just has the sense, why would that audience not need it?
They know it.
They know it. So why would he spend 2 chapters, let's say, like we might need to get that material? That would not drive home his point, you see. So would the audience of Hebrews have been familiar with the details?
Yes.
Yes, they would have been very familiar. They grew up with it. Okay? And think about, okay, you say, well, they're not of the tribe of Levi. But don't you know, if it's something, think about the secret thing. We're always interested in things like this, like angels, and we want to know more. Well, what do the priests do when they go in there? I can hear a child at 8 years old asking, what are the priests doing when they go in there? And what are these sacrifices all about? And what is going on in that Holy of Holies? So they would have heard this from a very early age for the most part. So that I want to deal with first. And then I want you to look at verse 9. All right? It was what? What do you have there? What's the next word? It was symbolic. Anybody have another word?
I have a figure.
A figure, that's King James, right? New King James is symbolic, so it was symbolic for the present time. What was symbolic?
That tabernacle.
That tabernacle, that old covenant, and all the things related to it, that was all that. So what were all these things according to verse 9? They were symbolic. Well, what's that mean?
They were shadow, they were
Yeah, we talked about shadow a
not a
lot.
real thing. They were
A pattern.
yeah.
They were a pattern, right? So look at this word. Here's the actual word, parabolic. Where have you seen that word before?
Parable.
Parables. Yeah, so they are placing a one thing by the side of another. You've had these classes, right? Give me the definition you learned as a child in one of these little Bible classes back. I didn't learn it, but you did. Have you sat in those? It's an earthly thing with a
Spiritual lesson.
spiritual lesson or a heavenly meaning, right? That's kind of the definition that we use. So an earthly item with a heavenly meaning to it. So that's what we're dealing with. And that's going to help us when you think about chapter 9. Because what he's doing in chapter 9, he's not teaching about the sanctuary for the sake of teaching about it, the tabernacle. That's not his point. The point is comparative. You see this also in verse 11. Look at verse 11. What's the first word in verse 11? But. Why is a but there? What's that going to set up? A comparison. Very good. However. So here's what you got. Contrast it with what you have now. Right? Here's this and here's that. So that's how this chapter rolls. And I don't want us to get lost in the first part of this because we're going to spend a little more time on the tabernacle than I first said we were going to. The more I looked at it, the more I thought, we probably need this more than I thought. So you may disagree with me, but here we go. Hebrews 9 verses 1 through 5. Then indeed even the first covenant had ordinances of divine service and the earthly sanctuary. For a tabernacle was prepared, the first part in which the lampstand, the table, and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant, overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. And above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. So that's a pretty quick summary of what makes up quite a few chapters in the Old Testament, right? And that's what the Holy Spirit wanted these brethren to get. Now, I don't want to make the assumption that we've got it because they had it. All right? So I'll go through this material at the rate you want me to. That means it's up to you. If I need to slow down, you tell me. Or you ask more questions. So what is the earthly sanctuary? What are we talking about there?
The tent.
The tent-like structure of the wilderness. Right? So that goes back to Exodus 25. So take your Bibles, let's go back there. Exodus 25. We're going to read verses 1 through 10. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly, with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them, watch verse 8, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits, etc., etc. And then you get over to chapter 39.
So they donated.
Yes, they donated these things, right. A free will offering, we'd say. Verse 32 of chapter 39. Thus all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting was finished, and the children of Israel did according to all the Lord had commanded Moses, so they did. Look at chapter 40, verses 1 and 2. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Then you get down to verse 16. Thus Moses did according to all that the Lord had commanded him, so he did. And then go back with me to chapter 8 in verse 5.
Exodus.
No, Hebrews 8, verse 5, sorry. Hebrews 8, verse 5. Remember that whole conversation? Here it is. I'm picking up in this thought. Who served the copy and shadow of the heavenly things as Moses was divinely instructed. Remember I said he was warned. When he was about to make the tabernacle, for he said, God said to him, see that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. So who authorized and gave the pattern for this earthly tabernacle?
God.
God did. Now what we get to see, brethren, is this was not a whim on the part of God. Nothing is, by the way. Nothing is. Now I may not always understand God's reason and purpose, but sometimes He lets me understand. He allows me to be a part of that understanding, that depth of His wisdom, and He said, look, there's going to be this structure. I want you to have this structure. And it's going to have these items in this room, and these items in this. These things are not just something that God thought it'd be good for you Israelites to do. It's much deeper and broader than that. And so we are on the other side of that. These brethren in the book of Hebrews are now on the other side of that. But they're just now getting it. Okay? We've had most of our Christian lives, right? Hearing these, we're used to kind of these shadows and types and parables and things, the spiritual application of physical things. We're used to that. Okay? So, back to Exodus 25, just to make a point out of this so you can see it. Look at this. In Exodus 25 and verse 8, God said, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. And look down at verse 22. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. Did you know that?
He's talking about the high priest.
Not just the high priest, but yeah, it relates to, through the high priest, Moses is going to get his information. And the children of Israel are going to get their information. Well, that's different. If you didn't know that, right? So, did all the law come through Moses? We say that. It's the Mosaic law. We refer to it that way. Well, in one sense, yes. But God is using this methodology. God is going to meet with them. And as you pointed out, it's the high priest that does that. It's not Moses. It's the high priest. And so those commands from God are going to come there and come through that process. So it's much more than those tables of stone, right? And that's one of those aha moments. And you start to think, oh, wait, there's a lot more going on in this tabernacle than maybe you first thought. Okay, so why did God, here's the thing I want you to get from it, why did God want the Israelites to build the tabernacle based on Exodus 25?
So he could communicate with them?
So He could communicate with them? And what's He say in verse 8? He wants to dwell with us. The God of all glory wants to dwell with us, and us to dwell with Him. He wants His creation to dwell with Him. Now, is that a big deal?
Yes.
I tell you what, that sums up salvation. Because if it weren't for His desire, now I know love, but that's desire, isn't it? If He just said, well, I love you, and then didn't do anything. No, I love you, and I desire for you to be with me. and me to be with you to such an extent that I will do everything it takes to make that happen. For how many years has he done everything it takes? Yeah, whatever years you have. That's, yeah, ultimate in Christ, yeah.
I watch the History Channel a lot, and I've heard them say that God dwelt in the ark. I mean, it was a actual coming down and dwelling, but that's not exactly what he's talking about.
Well, he's in between the two cherubim. In what is referred to, what do you usually do on a seat? You sit. Now, you got to stop thinking God is a spirit. John 4. Does God sit? Well, in one sense, I mean, I get it. That's for our benefit probably more than anything.
He reigns.
But he dwells. Okay, what do you know about, we have this during the day, we have this huge cloud coming up. You know where it's coming from? Between the cherubim all the way up through the tabernacle, all the way up into the sky, so that we as Israelites, 3 million of us or so, gathered around the farthest away, could see that God dwells among us. But it's nighttime. Now what happens?
The flame.
It's a fire. Why didn't it just consume this tabernacle? Because it doesn't.
Just like the bush.
That's right, because it doesn't. It's God's presence. Okay, so God's presence is there in that sense. Okay, just like, and that's a good example, just like at the burning bush. Now, think about this. We've got a room that is 15 cubits by, or is that right, 20 cubits? I get the cubits mixed up. About 15 feet by 15, I got it up here right. 15 by 15, I think that's right, 15 feet by 15 feet. So it's a square room. Could that possibly contain God? What did God say?
The earth is his footstool.
Yeah, the earth is my footstool. There's nothing you could build that would, don't get to thinking this contains God, but His presence. So that's a good word, His presence, right? So, all right. Here's what we're talking about. 1440 BC is suggested as the date that the tabernacle was first assembled. But you will notice there is much more to this than a tent. What is this? Is that important?
Yes, a curtain wall.
Have you got it right, Moses, if you don't do this?
Nope.
What about this if you don't do this? Have you got it right, Moses? No. Have you got it right if you don't do this? No. But he doesn't start with any of those things in the book of Hebrews. Why not? They knew it. Well, of course you have this. It's kind of like, so look, again at Hebrews 9, 1 through 5. Then indeed the first covenant had ordinances of divine service and the earthly sanctuary, for a tabernacle was prepared. He's going to start with that tabernacle. He's going to focus on it, so are we. The first part, in which was, so there's that first room. What do we call that? We call it the holy place, right? In which was the lampstand, the table, the showbread, which is called the sanctuary, and behind the second veil, interesting phrase, the part of the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. What's your King James Version have?
Holiest of all.
Holiest of all. Okay, we call that sometimes referred to as Holy of Holies. Same room, same place we're talking about, which had the golden censer and the Ark of the, we'll talk about why that's there, the Ark of the Covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant, and above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. So here we are. What is the layout and contents of the entire tabernacle area? You see, that'd be a pretty big study.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
That would include
The bronze laver, the bronze sacrificial altar, right? We've got this. This is a veil, right? It's also a gate. It's an entrance. I believe that's east here. It comes in this way. The way that it's set up, God lays all that out. Even the way that you place it is important. Yeah.
Gentiles were not allowed in that.
Oh, Gentiles were not allowed anywhere, anywhere in this area. Sorry, ladies, but you weren't allowed in this area either. Okay? So, the heads of the household, most often, would be the ones who would carry the sacrifices. Okay? Now, there were other sacrifices that could be made and so forth, But when you look out here, you got the gate, the bronze altar, and the bronze laver. And then you've got this, there's that court fence, and went all the way around. You saw all the tribes. The tribes are laid out in a certain way. You remember how they moved? What told you to move, tribes? That cloud moved, or that fire moved. I often think, can you imagine 2 o'clock in the morning? And now you got to move. And when you're thinking about this, 3 million people. When I first used to do this, I used to say, that's about the size of the city of Memphis. You're going to move. Pack it up. We're moving. Yeah. Is that an ordeal?
No.
Guess what? When you go back, that's why those books are so important. You study Exodus and Leviticus, and you find out, wow, there's ways that they're told to do that. And specific ones have specific responsibilities, especially when it comes to this tabernacle. How to set it up, how to take it down. Think that's important in the mind of God?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Why don't we study things like that?
We
Yeah.
study what pertains
Let me get A-Dip.
Well, there's going to be a punchline in your next section. And kind of an answer to your last question, why did God want that done, gets to us, the new covenant, that teaching thing, right, all that pattern idea.
And Tudor.
The way to the holiest of holies was not manifest in that system.
Yes.
That's
it right in
the
verse
next
9 of it.
section,
Yeah. So,
That's
yes.
why.
See, then they didn't, what are they looking for? They're looking for the Messiah, and we talked about that covenant. Once they have that covenant, the new covenant, things like that. But we're looking back. When we look back, our focus is pretty clear on, the veil is rent. We're not under that system. So I'm under a better, so let's study that. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't gain, but there are some things that, the length of the veil. Maybe there's some significance to it. I've got a lot of books in my library that place significance on every little item. And I just don't, unless God tells me it's symbolic and it's specifically intended to be something, we're not going to venture there. So we're not going to try and read it again. Look, here's where we're focused. So what is the layout and contents of the tabernacle, the tent itself? What have we been told? What items are there? You ready? Let's go through it. So this is the holy place, right? You can see it's this overall, this structure is 45, you add those together, 45 feet long, 15 feet wide. So this portion of it is 30 feet by 15. In this 30 foot by 15 space, there are 3 items. All right? And you might not like my dashes, but this is the holy place, or most holy place, holy of holies, and there's one item, according to what we find in Exodus and Leviticus. So we got to figure out what's going on here, and it's really not as difficult once you study it a little bit. Okay, so what's this up here?
Lampstand?
That would be the lampstand. Thank you for for using your imagination and getting a lampstand out of that. Yes, that's the golden lampstand. So here it is, right? There's the whole thing again. Bronze laver, bronze altar, and there's the tent-like structure within it, and there it is, and it looks something like this. Okay, and that's based on the things that are recorded, and a great amount of detail is given concerning this. We're not going to go into all that detail. This might be a better artist rendition, and
Is that what the Jews today call a menorah?
it's sort of, yes. I guess the simplest way to put it is yes. Yeah.
Their version of it.
Their version of it. That would be the best. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, some things, this comes from Exodus 25. We're not going to read all of these. Some of them are more pertinent than others. There's a few points about them that I'll emphasize. So, the lampstand was made of 1 talent, 125 pounds of pure hammered gold. One solid piece. Did they donate very much?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. You remember what Moses had to do?
Ready to stop them.
Had to stop. They were giving so much that, beyond. But that's all going to be hammered out. You talk about skill. By one piece. Had a central shaft with 6 pieces, branches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's that central piece, 3 on each side, making it a 7-branched lampstand. All right? Each branch had knobs, it's kind of hard to see up here, flowers, and an almond-shaped bowl to hold pure olive oil. That was all donated too. Okay? So, if you'll go over to Leviticus 24, there's something about this I do want you to see. Leviticus 24, verses 1 through 4. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring to you pure oil of pressed olive for the light, to make the lamps burn continually. So when do they go out if it's continually?
Never.
Never. Never. Outside the veil of the testimony, in the tabernacle of meeting, so in the holy place is what he's talking about. Aaron. Now who's Aaron? He's the high priest. Now watch it. Shall be in charge of it from evening until morning before the Lord continually. So if it goes out, who's God holding responsible? Aaron. Who's Aaron going to hold responsible?
Aaron.
The priest that he put in charge of it, you can bet. And if it's your duty to do that, you're going to do it. That isn't new stuff. You know, we sometimes think in management we came up with things like that. That's been around a long time. Okay, outside the veil of the testimony, Aaron shall be in charge of it from evening until morning before the Lord continually. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. He, that is the high priest, Aaron, shall be in charge of the lamps on the pure gold lampstand before the Lord continually. Sounds pretty important. The priest's duty was to trim the wicks and keep the lamps lit. The high priest was in charge of the lampstand, make sure that they did their duty. And you, again, read all that in Leviticus. The lampstand was designed to provide light for the tabernacle. Now, if you've ever been to one of these models, we went to the one in Pennsylvania, and when this is lit with what is supposed to be gold, of course it's gold paint, it's not solid gold, but with that, even with all the lights out, that throws off more light than you could imagine. It's amazing how much light it puts out. Okay. The lampstand was the first item seen upon entering the tabernacle as a reminder to his people that God is light. That's not too much of a reach. Some things are. Some things are. So we'll stay away from those reaches. What's this? What do you think that is? Yeah, the table of showbread. It's a table. So here it is. That's over in Exodus 25 as well. There's an artist's rendition of what it would look like set up. Again, here we are in Luke 24, if you're still there, verses 5 through 9 this time. I mean Luke. Did I say Luke? Leviticus. I said Luke. Where did I get Luke on my mind? Okay. Leviticus 24, 5 through 9. Sorry. You shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake. You shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. And you shall put pure frankincense on each row, that it may be on the bread for a memorial, an offering made by fire to the Lord. Every Sabbath he shall set it in order before the Lord continually, being taken from the children of Israel by an everlasting covenant. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, for it is most holy to him from the offerings of the Lord made by fire, by a perpetual statute. So, okay?
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
this? Was it unleavened or leavened?
Unleavened.
Unleavened.
Yeah.
Okay.
From everything I can determine, it's unleavened. What do we have here?
That's the incense stand.
That's the incense stand. So this gets to be the altar of incense. This starts to become pretty important. Why? He hasn't really, he just mentioned these two kind of in passing, but this one he mentions, where does he mention it? What side of the veil is it supposed to be on?
He mentions it.
He mentions it over here.
Yeah.
Okay, but there it is over here, so we got to figure that out. So let's go to Exodus first. This won't help you figure it out necessarily, but it'll get you thinking. A couple of things about it. I'm just going to read a couple of parts of this. You shall make an altar to burn incense on. You shall make it of acacia wood. All right? Then if you go down through all this, it's going to have verse 3, overlay its top, its sides all around, its horns with pure gold, so it's got horns on every corner, the rings to carry it, and so forth. Then you get down to verse 10. Aaron shall make atonement. Wait a minute. He's going to make atonement upon its horns once a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonement. Once a year he shall make atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is most holy to the Lord. Anyone scratching their heads yet?
Sounds like sacrifice.
Atonement is part of the blood. Once a year is when? The Day of Atonement. So this piece of furniture is going to have, look, it's got these 4 horns, and what's he going to do with some of the blood?
Put it on each one.
He's going to put it on each one of those horns. Did you know that before tonight? Must be pretty important for that to happen every year in this process. Okay? With that, look over at chapter, the same chapter, verse 34 through 38. The Lord said to Moses, take sweet spices, sakti, and ancha. If I mispronounce these, I apologize. Galbanum, and pure frankincense. With these sweet spices there shall be equal amounts of each. You shall make of these an incense, a compound according to the art of the perfumer. And by the way, that also was an art. Just like, these metallurgists are artists. Where do they get their gift from, by the way? God. So, salted, pure, and holy. Watch this. Verse 36, you shall beat some of it very fine and put some of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of meeting, where I will meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. Now, what you remember, where is God going to meet with you?
No, above between the wings.
Yeah, at the mercy seat, the cherubim. So some of this incense is going to end up there. Okay, we're going to see that it's a little bit more going on than that. Verse 37. But as for the incense which you shall make, you shall not make any for yourselves according to its composition. It shall be to you holy for the Lord. Whoever makes any like it to smell it, he shall be cut off from his people. Now I knew that you couldn't mess around with this. How did I learn that? Leviticus 10. A couple of guys named Nadab and Abihu. What did they do?
Strange fire.
They used strange fire. What if I take and make me some incense at my house over at my tent, just like this compound? What's going to happen to me?
You're going to be cut off.
I'm going to be cut off, and what's he going to say? Be cut off from his people?
Yeah.
That's it? Okay.
Which, you were lost if you were cut off from the...
Yeah, you were. Yeah. Okay. So, the altar of incense was made from shittim acacia wood. Shittim, if you've got, I believe that's King James, got shittim. And stood in front of the veil, concealing the most holy place. So we'll come back to that. Its 4 corners each had a horn made from one piece. Its top, sides, and horns were overlaid with gold and a crown or molding all around the top. The altar of incense had rings on its side for carrying poles. Most of the furniture did. The high priest burned incense upon it every morning and evening. Now, we didn't read all that, but that too was done. High priest busy? I thought he just had one day out of the year that he worked. We see he's pretty busy already, right? Every morning, every evening he's doing this. The fire for the incense came from the bronze altar out in the outer court. What if he got it someplace else? Surely that wouldn't be a problem. Nadab and Abihu again. Is God serious?
Yes.
Nadab and Abihu again. Yeah. The Lord required a special sweet incense, as what we just read, a mixture of spices used only for the tabernacle, to be burned on the altar of incense. This is the only place that it was supposed to be used. So the priest was in danger of death if any other incense was burned. Wouldn't that be true? If this is true, wouldn't this be true?
Yes.
Okay. The altar of incense. And this is from Leviticus 4, verse 7. I just wanted to get it up here for us. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of meeting. He shall pour the remaining blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So there's a lot of blood. And by the way, I think sometimes, maybe you're like me, I thought he went in there just once. And then I heard, no, he went in there once for his own sin, then he went in for the sins of the people. Well, that's 2 times. And then I thought, well, that was it. I'm not sure he didn't go in there more times than that, folks. Oh, that can't be right. It's me, so. Okay, the Day of Atonement. Then he, the high priest, shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, with his hands full of sweet incense, beaten fine, bring it inside the veil, and he shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die. If you think I reached a false conclusion, we're there now. That's Leviticus 16, verse 12 and 13.
So they moved it?
No. He did actually have what they think is a container to carry it, which would make sense. And that's laid out for us, Leviticus. So he would carry from one place to there, and by the we're going to run out of time. The way this appears is the whole room is filled with this. So that, I'm talking about the Holy of Holies is filled with this. So you've got it burning on the outside, you've got it burning on the inside. Think about this. You have got a man, a sinful man, who is going to approach God. Any problems with that? All kinds of problems with that. This is before the blood of Christ. There are all kinds of problems with that. And yet God is going to have an arrangement to where we can do this. But why can't we all just go in there? Can't do it. Can't do it. God said no. Who can go in there? We got limited access, don't we? Who can go into the holy place?
Priest.
Just priest. We said a moment ago, who can go into this very area? Right? Now we got the males of the household. And they can't be, they can't have leprosy. They can't be blind. There's all sorts of restrictions related to that, and there's reasons for that. But now you get all this, and now you're on the Day of Atonement. Who can go into the very presence of God? One man. So whatever God requires here must be very important, is my main point tonight. Okay? So look at Hebrews 9, verse 2. For a tabernacle was prepared, the first part, in which the lampstand, the table, and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary, and behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, part A of verse 4, which had the golden censer. We know the rest, but there's the golden censer. Now, when it says golden censer in the New King James Version, they're translating that as golden censer being something that's carried, as opposed to this altar of incense. But if it's being burned on the mercy seat in some way, and I don't know the details of that, how that was done exactly, but if it is, then that would be an altar too, of some sort. So why does the Hebrew writer associate the altar of incense with the Holy of Holies? It's clearly located in the holy place. That's the question you have. So I'm asking you, what did you come up with? And we got about 2 minutes. Quick answers. Yeah, AJ?
Well, a lot of typology in all of those implements of the tabernacle that go to the temple. To make the type and shadow thing from the censer and the smoke about prayer,
Yes. Revelation 8.
becomes powerful under the new covenant.
Right. So, a couple of things we've already seen. Look at its placement and association in setting up the Holy of Holies. When you set up the Holy of Holies, this is set up. Then the veil. That's kind of interesting. And it's like the veil goes after this. So, and that's the way it's written. When you read through Exodus, you read through Leviticus, that's the way it's presented to us. That's in Exodus 30, verse 1, 6, chapter 40, verse 5, verse 26 and 27. But perhaps it refers to the special relationship between the altar of incense and the services conducted on the Day of Atonement. That blood being applied to the four horns of this, that fine powder, now it's powdered. So it's even more attention given to it. You got the incense on the altar of incense in the holy place. Then you've got this fine powdered incense that is carried into the Holy of Holies and burned. So, Revelation 8, verse 3 and 4. What's it say about our prayers? Let's get this in real quick. If you look over there, Revelation 8, verse 3 and 4, a lot of symbols and some signs in the book of Revelation, but notice that another angel having a golden censer, kind of interesting language, right? Came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne, and the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. When we witnessed this, I didn't know this. I had studied this and kind of looked at it, and you look at the veil. We'll talk about the veil next week, Lord willing. But the veil is approximately 15 feet tall as well. Well, it doesn't cover it completely. You might think, well, it's just an absolute blank there. No, it's not. You've got those rings and it's hanging. So you go and you study that. Guess what happens if we had incense burning up there? Okay? And we open the door. Where's it going to go? It's going to come back here. Well, guess what was happening when we were at that one in Pennsylvania? What happened was they lit that. Now, they didn't light it the way they were supposed to or anything, but they lit it enough to get that incense going up. It went up and over the curtain first without any help. I was just like, whoa. Because I was thinking like you are about Revelation 8, verse 3 and 4. And so there's a lot going on here. Now, the Israelites would not have known any of that, like you know. Right? Who else can share the prayers that you offer to God? I mean, can another God?
Oh, no.
Can someone in your home? Can you pray to your parents? Should you pray to your parents? You know, think of it that way. So again, that incense, very special. This event is very special. The atonement that's taking place there, so it all foreshadows prayer. We'll pick it up right here for next time, okay? Good class.